total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
If anybody in America thinks that that was even close to being an okay debate by Joe Biden, I'm living in a parallel universe.
It's a really disappointing debate performance from Joe Biden. I don't think there's any other way to slice it.
But that was not what we needed from Joe Biden. It's not just panic, it's pain.
The Democrat Party is in disarray right now, in real time. Now, does that mean that Trump is going to coast into the White House? It does not. I believe that Democrats are prepared to burn this country to the ground to prevent it. So they were trying to give Biden every advantage so that he could win the debate. They didn't want this because they can remove him by invoking the 25th Amendment. So what now? Welcome to another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton, and we have a lot of ground to cover today, and we're really trying to squeeze in an extra episode here. We're recording this over the weekend. We've just had the Biden-Trump debate, and there are some things that I want to say. Now, typically, in an Ideas Have Consequences episode, we take a while to think about the topic that we're going to present to you because we want to give you a considered response. There are some people who would say, hey, Larry, I'd love it if you did a show every day. It's not really possible for me to do that, at least the way that we try to do it, because we're trying to give you a carefully prepared, thought out, considered presentation on ideas rather than just me, say, reacting to the news, reacting to the headlines. That's most of what political commentary is. It's just perpetual outrage over this or that policy or event or what have you. I mean, if you think about say an idiotic show like The View, that's all they do. They're just offering unconsidered opinions about absolutely everything. And they sound like idiots because you often get things wrong like that. But I have a lot of things to say about this debate, and I've had a few days to think about it and to process all that has happened here and what is going on, and I felt like we really needed to get this episode out. Now, having said that, be patient with us because it may have a few glitches in it because we just don't have the kind of time that we would normally have to do the editing. But the debate itself, let's talk about this, but I want to start at what may seem like an unlikely place. I mean, I'm a historian by training, so of course, I look to history for some of the answers to the main issues that we're dealing with today. I mean, I operate from a kind of assumption that there is no problem that we face today that we cannot find answers, solutions to, wisdom regarding if we look to the past. If we look to the past, if we look to the wisdom of those who preceded us, who dealt with either the same things like, say, Marxism and socialism, which we're seeing today. I mean, we just need to look to the voice of the saints, of the martyrs, of the people who suffered under those regimes. They are speaking to us, even from their graves, telling us what is going on. And they would look at all that's taking place in America across the Western world and say, I've seen that movie before. But even regarding some of the technological problems, you may say, well, gosh, they didn't face those things. Yeah, but the ideas behind it, they did. And the power problems, they did. And so I want to begin at the Leipzig Disputation in 1519. Unusual place to start, isn't it? Now, some of you might not know what the Leipzig Disputation was, but it was a debate between Martin Luther, who had just a couple of years before had unintentionally launched what became known as the Protestant Reformation in 1517 when he nailed the 95 Theses on the church door. And he was invited to debate his ideas in Leipzig. And there he was to debate a papal representative, a very skilled debater by the name of Johann Eck. Now, Eck was a deeply dishonest debater. He's like a clever member of modern media today. He was not interested in actually discussing the merits of Luther's ideas. He came to the Leipzig Disputation with one goal in mind, and that was to label Luther a heretic. But Luther wasn't a skilled debater, and being a true academic, I mean a real one of the sort that we don't, as a rule, see today, he tended to take all questions very seriously and endeavor to give a serious answer to those questions. Now, that is a problem if you're debating. And I say this as somebody who's participated in a number of very high-level public debates on CNN, on CNN International, Al Jazeera, and elsewhere. And I've moderated and organized a number of other debates. Now, we're going to come to that in just a moment when we're talking about the debate that took place on CNN, because I have a number of observations regarding that just from an organizational standpoint. But what happened in the Leipzig Disputation was this. Luther didn't seem to recognize that the goal was to label him a heretic. And he didn't want to be labeled a heretic. He saw himself as a Catholic who was trying to reform the church from within. And he knew what happened to heretics. Heretics were burned at the stake. And at one point during the debate, Eck, I picture him with a crooked finger, pointing at Luther. He asks him this dangerous question: do you agree with the doctrines of Johann Huss? Now, John Huss had been burned at the stake as a heretic just about 100 years before, in 1415 at the Council of Constance. He was invited there just like Luther would be later invited to the Diet of Worms, and he was granted, he was told he would have free passage, and then he came and they seized him and they burned him at the stake, called him a heretic. So Luther, if he'd had a little mic in his ear, as some have alleged Joe Biden has in debates, if Joe Biden does have a little receiver in his ear, then whoever is on the other side is not his friend. Whoever is on the other side is an idiot. As we go through life, the years bring us wisdom, experience, and memories we hold dear. Yet with age, our health often faces new challenges. It's a natural part of life, but it's crucial to address these changes with the right care and attention. For me, one of the ways to stay sharp is to supplement. I've been using Liver Health Formula, and I recommend you try it for yourself to see the results that it can bring. And right now, I think is the time to start taking care of your liver, because there is a silent epidemic affecting 100 million Americans. 1 in 3 Americans suffer from an overworked and sluggish liver. It affects our weight, energy levels, clear thinking and productivity, and even sleep. Our livers get bombed every day with GMOs, microplastics, toxins, and all of the stuff that you might not even know about. Liver Health Formula can support your liver to minimize the impacts of all of this. It is a premium supplement designed with 11 clinically proven botanicals to support and detoxify your liver, helping you feel revitalized and ready to conquer each day. Just listen to Mr. Harrington's testimonial, who shared his transformative journey. At first, I was skeptical, but the health improvement has been nothing but amazing. The tired, foggy feeling I've had is gone. I have more energy for a longer duration. Also, the service and delivery is always prompt. Of course, results are not typical, thus you have to see for yourself. There's an exclusive deal for my audience. Head to getliverhelp.com/Larry. And as a special offer, you'll get a free 1-month supply of nano-powered omega-3s with your order. That's getliverhelp.com/Larry. But if Luther had had one in his ear, had that been possible, some Karl Rove type figure in the background would have been shouting, "Don't answer that question. Don't answer that question. It's a trap, Luther." But Luther took the question very seriously, and he thought about it for a moment, and he said, of the many ideas of John Huss, Christian ideas of John Huss, I can't really disagree with them. And Eck had exactly what he wanted in that moment. And he said, if you agree with John Haas, then you're a heretic like John Haas. Now, I'm not interested. Some of you will fall into the comments here and make this a Catholic versus Protestant discussion. That's not where I'm going with this. Rather, I'm talking about debates and debate strategy. Luther, for all of his intellect, was not a great debater. And that was because he, again, was an academic, a pure academic, and took the questions very seriously. And you need to have a little bit of the street fighter about you to be a good debater. And you need not be so naive as Luther was going into that particular debate. So Luther left that debate. One could argue that he lost the debate in terms of, the way it was perceived. And he was labeled a heretic. He was greatly shaken by what happened. That was a kind of Pyrrhic victory because up to that point, Luther had been really kind of focusing on, indulgences. And then after that, he decided, well, if I'm a heretic, I'm going to tell you what I think about everything. So he then went off on any number of other issues. Now, bearing that in mind, what I want to start with today, why I'm starting with the Leipzig Disputation, is I want to give you a kind of lens through which to view people who would interrogate you, how you deal with difficult people who interrogate you. And by interrogation here, I mean the kind of people who are grilling you and who are not asking what are really honest questions. Jesus dealt with people, regardless of whether you're a Christian or not. If you read the Gospels, it's very interesting to note that Jesus didn't take every question at face value. He didn't. He saw that some people were asking dishonest questions. Now, he could see the human heart, and we're not capable of doing that. John 2:23 through 25 tells us that. He understood the intentions of men. But we can still have, even though we don't have the ability to we don't have a little window into the soul, we can still sometimes tell whether or not a person means to do us malicious harm or not. And as I say, Jesus didn't take every question at face value. There were some people that he rejected the questions, and there were others that he recognized they were genuine seekers. The woman at the well, for instance, and numerous others. So we'll come back to that. So bearing this in mind, let's watch a little interview with Robert Downey Jr. Now, this is an interview he gave some years ago. His handlers are taking him from, a reporter to another to promote one of his Iron Man movies. I don't remember which one, but each interviewer is given 3 to 5 minutes to ask him a number of questions related to the movie. That's why he's there, to discuss the movie. But here you have a reporter who's going to make a name for himself, and he wants to make a name for himself by dredging up some of Robert Downey Jr.'s past. Now, watch how Robert Downey Jr. deals with this. Let me see if I can find this here. Here we go. Now, let's listen to this.
You say we're promoting an interview, promoting the movie. I mean, obviously you're doing a promotional round of interviews, and that's why we're talking about the movie. But we also would like to talk a little bit about you, and I don't know how comfortable you are, talking about.
Now, let me pause right there. So the camera goes from the interviewer to Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. now is feeling threatened. You see him look to his people, presumably his handlers, his agent, publicist, whoever. And he's looking at them like, where's this going? Where's this going? But he remains polite. He's going to listen to what this fellow has to say, at least until he can tell where he's really going. But you can tell he's now, a wall is starting to go up because he feels threatened. This is going to be personal, and he doesn't want to go here.
Yourself at the moment.
You have as much time as anyone else will.
Yeah, well, okay, well then let me just ask you a few more questions, and you can answer them if you want to and not if you don't want to. I mean,
so only what this much left anyway.
Well, I think we've got 3 more minutes on our agreement.
Your foot's starting to jump a little bit. You better get to your next question.
So Now Robert Downey Jr. is trying to move him along. He's remained. He's still there. But he recognizes this is, as I have called, an interrogator. This isn't somebody who's asking an honest question. This is somebody who's looking for a reaction.
The reason I'm asking about the past is that you've talked in other interviews again about your relationship with your father and the role of all of that in the dark periods you entered and taking drugs and drinking and all of that. And I just wondered whether you think you're free of all of that, or whether that's still something.
I'm sorry, I really don't. What are we doing?
Well, I'm just asking questions, that's all.
Right.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Now, pausing again. If you weren't following the news, a massive hit to the US dollar just came in June when Saudi Arabia did not renew its 50-year petrodollar deal with the US. Since 1974, Saudi Arabia has sold oil exclusively in US dollars, and that was huge to our global economic dominance. Now they want options other than the US dollar. So I ask you, if there is less demand for the dollar, what happens to the dollar? Look, it's reasons like that Americans turn to Birch Gold Group. For over 20 years, Birch Gold has helped tens of thousands of Americans protect their savings by converting an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. To learn more, text the word IDEAS to 989898 and claim your free, no obligation info kit on gold. That's IDEAS to 989898. Birch Gold has earned my trust for their education-first approach, their thousands of happy customers, and their countless five-star reviews. Protect your savings with gold before the dollar plunges any further. Protect your savings with gold before the dollar plunges any further. Text IDEAS to 989898 today. Robert Downey Jr. has already given him a shot across the bow. He's already indicated to him, I'm not interested in going there. I'm here to promote a movie. You have a limited amount of time, and you're wasting your time working up to something that I can tell is not what I want to discuss. So you better get on with it. Now the guy continues down this path, and Robert Downey Jr. is now giving him a second shot, saying, come on, ask a question about the movie. Move on. Move on. And again, he's looking at his handlers like, what's going on here? Is this a setup? What's taking place here? But the guy comes back with a dishonest response. You know, he's going, hey, I'm just trying to ask a question. I mean, it's not really a big deal. It's not a big deal. Now Robert Downey Jr. gets up, he pats the guy on the back, and he leaves. Meanwhile, the interviewer is acting like, well, I didn't do anything wrong. I mean, gosh, I was just trying to ask a question. Now, Robert Downey Jr. gave him 2 chances, and the third time he got up and left. Now, he would have been a much more effective, if he understood the theology and the history and the issues, that were actually being debated at the Leipzig Disputation. But in terms of the way he handled this guy, he would have been a much more effective debater than, say, Luther was in terms of just his personality, the way that he managed this guy. He recognizes what kind of interviewer this is. He recognizes what kind of interview it is, and he knows how to handle him. He warns him again, and then he says, I'm out of here. I'm not taking the bait. He's gone. Now, that was a very effective way of dealing with a very difficult person. Now, why I'm showing you this as we're working our way to discussion of the debate itself is because these are practical things for you to know. I think that often conservatives, particularly if they're Christian conservatives, is we think that the highest calling of a Christian is to be civil, is to be liked. If we can just be liked, if the other side will think we're really swell. And for that reason, it has led any number of Christians to making egregious compromises of faith and doctrine. It's because they've confused being salt and light with being civil. They're not the same thing. They are not the same thing. Jesus did flip over a few tables, and a lot of Christians have really not understood who Jesus was. He was lion and lamb. And it's the lion, it is the Lion of Judah that makes people very uncomfortable. Christians most of all, or at least people who say that they're Christians, because they love to judge themselves as outstanding people on the basis of their own civility. Ladies and gentlemen, being civil in the face of child mutilation is not to your merit. Being civil in the face of political corruption is not a mark in your favor. Being civil in the face of sheer evil is not to your credit. It says a great many things about you, one of which might be that you're a coward. We have to know how to identify and respond to interrogators. And here, Robert Downey Jr. gives us a good model of this. Now, let's watch Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson. This past week, Tucker Carlson was in Australia, and he was there giving a lecture of some kind. And while he's wrapping up, and now he's taking questions from the Australian media. And a woman by the name of Kat Wong, you can find her on Twitter. I was hoping to invite her and get her on this show, but it now looks like she's, kind of locked down her social media, or at least isn't responding. A woman named Kat Wong, she's decided to go for social media glory. She's going to do the very same thing, and because they follow a pattern, she's going to do the very same thing that this interviewer did with Robert Downey Jr. Now, let's see what Kat Wong does and what Tucker Carlson does in response to her. Let's listen to this.
Hi, Tucker. Thank you so much for your address today. So you talked a little bit about immigration, and in the past you've talked about how white Australians, Americans, Europeans are being replaced by non-white immigrants in what is often referred to as the Great Replacement Theory. This is the same...
Have I said that whites...
Now, right away, you can see some similarities with the Robert Downey Jr. interview. And we're reading body language. It's the reason why I tell my staff that when possible, with important meetings, I want them to be face-to-face. If you have an important conversation with someone that's 3 hours away, I would prefer that you meet with them. If that's not possible, then a phone conversation. If that's not possible, then an email. And the absolute worst is a text conversation. You're losing, I don't know what the percentage would be, there's no way to determine that, but you're losing a significant amount of communication as you move down that list that I've just given you. And a major part of communication, and a reason I want them to be face-to-face, even Zoom, you're losing something with Zoom, is body language. Now, when Robert Downey Jr. is first sitting there with this guy, he seems reasonably relaxed. He might be in a bit of a hurry. He's going from one interview to the next. But once the guy mentions something personal, you can see him begin to stiffen up. Now, let's look at Tucker Carlson. At the beginning of this, he's quite relaxed. He's leaning over on the podium. He smiles at her. He takes a drink of water. But his demeanor changes the moment she says that he is a proponent of the Great Replacement as it relates to strictly white people. Now, let's see what he does. So he immediately interrupts her when he sees that she's saying something that isn't true. He doesn't continue to give her a leash. He has decided she is a dishonest interrogator, not a questioner, an interrogator, and he interrupts her immediately. And let's see what he does.
Whites are being replaced?
Well,
I don't think I said that.
well, it's been mentioned on your show 4,000 times. And
Really, when did I say that?
on your
I
show.
said
on
whites
Fox?
are being replaced?
You have said that before.
Really?
Yeah.
I would challenge you to cite that because I'm pretty sure I haven't said that. I said native-born Americans are being replaced, including blacks.
Native-born Americans.
Native-born Americans.
And
Americans who, like black Americans, have been African Americans, have been in the United States for, in many cases, their families over 400 years. And their concerns are every bit as real and valid and alive to me as the concerns of white people whose families have been there 400 years. So I've never said that whites are being replaced. Not one time. And you can't
believe
cite
that's
it.
untrue.
So we just met, but when our relationship starts with a lie, it makes it tough to be friends. So
Well, you've been lying
let's
about
pull that
my
back.
See what he's done? He has now gone straight after her. He has turned it on her. Now, some would say he's just being a jerk here. I don't think so. I think he's doing exactly what he should do. He has recognized that she is in a cloaked way. She's accusing him of being a racist, and she is taking him out of context. She's taken him out of context. And so he has stopped her. He has corrected her and said, never said that. Cite it. Cite where I've said that. And furthermore, he's indicating to her, that what you're saying isn't true and you are lying. So he's turned it on her and told her she's a liar. And she is. Let's continue.
You've been lying
Let's
about
pull
my
that back. I'm
press gallery
happy to
colleagues all
explain what I
morning as
do
well,
think.
So.
Well, you actually can't say it because I didn't say it, and I don't believe it. And I'm telling you that to your face, so why don't you just accept me at face value? My concern is that the people who are born in the country are the main responsibility of its leaders. And as noted earlier, when those leaders shift their concern from the people whose responsibility it is to take care of to people around the world to put their priorities above that of their own citizens, that's immoral. And they are being replaced in my country, people who are born in the United States. And the birth rate tells the whole story. They are not at replacement rate. And so the U.S. population is growing because we're importing people from other countries. And my view is that happy people have children, and a functioning economy allows them to do that. And we don't have that. And so you need to fix the economy and fix the culture and make it so that people who want to have kids can. You don't just go for the quick sugar fix of importing new people. Like, that's my position. And if you think that's racist, that's your problem.
I never called you a racist.
But of course you are suggesting, and
Well,
I must say one of the reasons people don't like people like you in the media is that you never say exactly what you mean. Your slurs are all by implication, and you're about to tell me the great replacement theory is racist or anti-Semitic, whatever. I've said what I've said to you right now like 100 times in public. I hope to, if I live long enough, say it 100 more times. I think it's completely honest and real, not racist or scary. It's factually true. It's not a theory, it's a fact. And the whole point of your question was to be like, you're a scary racist.
Well, I haven't
And
actually
my
finished my
response is, no, I'm not. Okay, well, how about no more lying in your questions, and then I'll answer it.
Okay. Well, this is the same theory, or as you say, idea, that has inspired the New York Buffalo shooting where 11 black Americans were killed.
So Carlson has handled this brilliantly. This is a master class in how to handle an interrogator. And this is useful for you because while you may never find yourself in Australia in front of a large audience answering political questions, you run into people like this every day, don't you? I mean, if you have the courage that I encourage you to have on this show, then you are engaging your neighbors over the backyard fence or your colleagues at the water cooler or people at church. I mean, these days we now have to engage people at church on these kind of questions because we can find so many churches that are not sensible, or at least if they are, many people who aren't sensible in them because their minds have been polluted by all that's taking place in the culture and in particularly by the media that they consume. But he's dealing with her exactly right. He's pointed out to the whole audience, she's dishonest and she is accusing me of being a racist. Now she responds by saying, no, I'm not trying to accuse you of being a racist. Then she brings up a racist shooting and says he inspired it. Do you see what's happening here? Do you see what's happening here? So this is a masterclass in how to respond to this. Let's continue.
Two white Americans were killed. Like, it's also inspired.
It's not. First of all,
it's inspired one of the worst Australian guns
How do
of
they
all
get
time
people
to
this
shoot
stupid in the media? I guess it doesn't pay well. Look, I'm sorry. I've lived among people like you for too long, and I don't mean to call you stupid. Maybe you're just pretending to be, but I've never I'm totally against violence. I'm totally against the war in Ukraine, for example, which doubtless you support. And like all dutiful liberals, support more carnage. I don't. I hate mass shootings, actually. Nothing I said, what does it mean to inspire something? My views are not bigoted against any group. They're honest, they're factual. That's not hate, that's reality. And my views derive from my deep concern for Americans, actually. Americans aren't having kids because they can't afford to, and nobody in charge cares. And so that's my position. That doesn't inspire mass shootings. How dare you try to tie me to some lunatic who murdered people? How dare you, actually? And in fact, I mean, do you know what I mean? I'd be like, Hitler wore those shoes. A lot of people are saying that you're like Hitler. Can you explain those shoes? Hitler wore exactly the same shoes, and you're like, I've got nothing to do with Hitler. Well, that's how I feel about your absurd, disingenuous question.
Right, so therefore you support gun control?
What? I thought it couldn't get dumber, but it did. No, I don't support disarming law-abiding people so they can't defend themselves. So the government has a monopoly on violence? I don't think so. First of all, in my country, that's illegal, as you know. But moreover, it should be illegal in every country. A sovereign person has the right to defend himself and his family. Period. And
now that's just fantastic. Now what you're seeing right there is him, he begins, his body language tells us this, he begins by giving her the benefit of the doubt. Second, he identifies that she didn't deserve it. He identifies that she is trying to trap him. And thirdly, he identifies that she's deeply dishonest. Now, do I think she thinks she's deeply dishonest? No. I think that this is if anything should tell you that you should be highly suspicious of modern media, it is this, because she's a member of it. She clearly has been brainwashed by the, all the propaganda, not just that she's writing or that she's speaking, but that she's consuming. She believes it. Secondly, she's not educated. She's not educated. She is not a very intelligent journalist. This is the level of journalism that we get these days. I've seen behind the curtain, and I can tell you that she's typical of what is behind it. So just because you see something in writing or you see it on NBC News or Fox News or CNN or wherever doesn't mean you should automatically believe it. And some of you will say, well, of course, I never believe it. Well, unfortunately, many people do. And he has shown you how to deal with this. He identifies it for what it is, he turns it on her, and he goes after her, and she continues down this stupid path. So, I wanted you to now she did, by the way, again, just like the guy who was questioning Robert Downey Jr., she's going for social media fame, and by golly, she got it, just like the other guy did. Probably just not quite the way she had envisioned it. But nevertheless, she seems to have achieved it. If I can, I'll try to get Kat Wong on this show. It would be my intention to treat her gently and to give her the opportunity to give her side of this. But I won't let her come on here and lie. So would the bow tie wearing Tucker Carlson of 20 years ago have handled this the way that he did here? I think the answer to that is no. I don't think he would have. I certainly wouldn't have 20 years ago, maybe not 15 years ago. What has happened to Tucker Carlson is he has been brutalized by the media, and that changes you. It does change you. I know from very personal experience, having been attacked by CNN, by BBC, by the New Yorker, by the Guardian, by the Atlantic, by the Independent, dishonestly, and where you have journalists who know they are being dishonest in what they're writing and what they're saying and what they're tweeting about you. And you naively come into it, as I say, the Tucker Carlson, I think, probably I'm speculating, of 20 years ago, certainly I would have, you come into it thinking truth matters, like Luther. You think, yeah, I'm going to get the opportunity here to talk about the solas. I'm going to get to talk about justification by faith. I'm going to have the opportunity here to explain why I believe these doctrines because the Bible actually says them. And then you get into the debate, and this is what Luther discovered, and he found out they weren't interested in that. Same thing would repeat itself at the Diet of Worms. He would say, I came, planning to discuss what was written in my books. And they said, Luther, did you write those books? And he said, yeah, I did. And they said, get out of here. You come into it initially when you're younger, when you're naive, and you think that truth matters. You're idealistic. You're not to be faulted for being idealistic. It's a good trait, honestly. A certain measure of naivete is, I think, kind of a good thing in that it suggests you're not so cynical and jaded by the world and all the evil that is in it. But in my profession, Tucker Carlson's profession, and in Donald Trump's profession, and for that matter, Martin Luther's profession, you can't afford to be naive. You have to be ready to recognize a trap when it is being set for you. And sometimes the way you recognize them is by falling in them on previous occasions. You have to learn. And sometimes you learn the hard way. You get your bumps and bruises. Now, Robert Downey Jr., he dealt with he'd been in a million interviews. There had been attempts to try to bring up his past. And there's something personal in there for you as well. If you have been forgiven by Jesus Christ for your sins, and you've attempted to seek forgiveness from those people you've sinned against. You see, the sins of Robert Downey Jr. did not involve this guy. He did not sin against this individual. He owes him nothing. Do not let people continue to bring those things up to you. Don't let them continue to throw them before you. That's satanic, and I mean quite literally satanic. Scripture refers to the devil, refers to Satan as the accuser for a reason. We serve a God who throws our sins as far as the east is from the west, and he remembers them no more. And what is meant by that isn't that he doesn't actually remember them. It means he no longer counts them against you. Move on. Move on. Do not let people, and particularly those people that it didn't involve, that your sin wasn't against, continue to drag you before some sort of tribunal, whether it's one of their own making or it's another one. And Robert Downey Jr. has decided, this doesn't involve you. It's my past. I've dealt with my past. Whatever the problems are, they're my problems. They're not yours. Ask me questions about the movie or I'm out of here, buddy. And he got up and he left. Good for him. And Tucker Carlson is saying, you're trying to accuse me of something I haven't actually done. You're trying to say that I'm a racist. You're trying to say that I'm promoting white supremacy, and it's not true, and I'm going to call you out on it. Now, I think an earlier iteration of Tucker Carlson, certainly I would have some years ago before I got brutalized, would have been to sit and listen to the question and think it through very carefully and try to take her very seriously. Or at least take the question seriously. He takes her seriously. He just doesn't take her question seriously because he knows she's dishonest. And that's important that we do that. Now, I'll just share one little personal example as it relates to this. Some years ago, I was invited to speak to an atheist group. I'd published a piece in The Atlantic on atheism, on collegiate high school level atheism, and that piece had gone viral. And so I was invited by an atheist group at a major university to come and give a presentation, which I did. So I came and they wanted me to explain why I believed in God, and I gave this hour-long presentation, a sophisticated presentation on why I believed, what was the evidence for God's existence. And I laid all this out. And as soon as I'm done, one of the first questioners was a guy like this, who was trying to get attention and chuckles from the audience by mocking my presentation. So he begins with this silly question about beavers in Noah's Ark. You know, if there were two beavers on there, I mean, surely they'd have eaten all the wood. They'd have eaten the ark. You know, the chuckles of his buddies sitting there around him, who were idiots just like he was. And so I asked him simply this question. I said, if I can give you a reasonable answer to your question, will you become a Christian? Because that's why I'm here. He said, no. And I said, then I won't ask your question. I'm moving on. And there was a collective gasp in the audience, like, oh, they couldn't believe that a Christian speaker had come to their campus and had dismissed a question. But it sent a ripple through the audience, and it made it very clear, I am here for your souls. I'm here to claim your souls, and I will not pursue the trivial. I wouldn't have done that 10 years prior to that. It took the experience of a man who had done many of these Q&As, but an earlier version of me would have wasted 20 minutes trying to answer that stupid question. You need to learn. So I'm hoping to save you that trouble, that you learn how to deal with interrogators. Now, the debate itself, the presidential debate, Donald Trump can be a very effective debater precisely because he has a bit of the street fighter about him. Now, those people who want to portray Donald Trump as some kind of unique crazy man, they're either themselves just inexperienced or they're liars. And it tends to be the latter, but sometimes it is the former. Donald Trump is fairly typical. If you're from my region of the United States, the southern part of the United States, we don't have Donald Trumps down here. Not as a rule, not in polite society. And that's because social grace in polite society in the American South is emphasized. It's why Southern manners often, and there's a disproportionate number of presidents from the American South as compared to its population versus other regions of the country. And that's because Southern manners translate well to other portions of the country, as does a Southern accent. Not a real redneck Southern accent, but kind of a genteel, educated Southern accent does well in other parts of the country. It's not to say that other accents aren't fine or aren't normal or aren't okay, but I'll just simply tell you that to Southerners, a Northeastern accent, say Bostonian or the Bronx, let's say, it translates badly to this part of the country, and that's because it's like fingernails on a chalkboard to Southern ears. I'm not making a comment as to whether it's right or wrong. I'm just simply stating a reality. So Southern accents, Southern manners translate well, but they don't often translate well into our portion of the country. And a guy like Trump, if he weren't, running for president of the United States, the Trump that people knew 30 years ago, let's just say he wasn't a celebrity, wouldn't do as well here. And that's because he's very abrupt, crass, uncouth, as many Southerners would see him. But I would also say this. He's very typical of a New Yorker, of a Bostonian, somebody from Philadelphia. He has that beating chest bravado of a guy in his line of work. And now that he is a champion for Red Staters, of course, in my part of the country, he's loved. He's loved because people have come to sort of understand and accept him for who he is. And it's made him a good debater. When he can stay disciplined. On some occasions he can't. And I think that the CNN interviewers were trying to bait him a little here, hoping he would lose his discipline and that he would become like that player on the field who is a hothead. He's got talent, but he gets so many penalties because when he's trash talked, he can't help but start swinging. And they were hoping to get Trump swinging. They were hoping that Trump would break his discipline and that he would become the guy. He would start ranting up there and they could say, see, he's not presidential. This guy's a madman. But Trump was his best on this occasion because he maintained his discipline. He maintained his discipline. And because he isn't naive about these kinds of things. If ever he was. I don't know that he ever was, but he certainly isn't now. He's been in front of the media the whole of his adult life. So he's pretty good at handling these things when he can stay disciplined, and he was wonderfully disciplined the other night. But before the debate, I had tweeted that the debate itself was irrelevant. And the reason I said that is for this. Let's put up this little graphic for you. I don't know who did this, and I would be happy to give them credit for it if I knew. But it's just a graphic here that says, in case you're undecided, and it has Trump. We see over on one side the percentages related to a variety of categories under a Trump presidency and those under Biden. So we begin with the inflation rate. It's 1.9% under Trump, 17 whopping percent under Biden. Gas prices, $2.17 under Trump, $3.96 under Biden. Average rent, $1,096, $2,395 under Biden. I have watched this with young people, with my own children having to deal with these kinds of things, more than doubling under Biden. And do you see how crushing this is for the middle class and lower? The NASDAQ up 62% under Trump. Under Biden, up 13.8%. Grocery prices plus 3.5%, which is a standard inflationary rate. 25% under Biden. Electricity, no change under Trump, up 21.43% under Biden. Real average hourly rate, the earnings, 7.1% under Trump, negative 3.5% under Biden. So do you see what's happening? And the reason I said that the debate was irrelevant, because I'm thinking to myself, I mean, if at this point, all the evil that we're seeing, this doesn't even mention things like open borders and the increased violence in our country, crime rates, Marxism, the transing of children. It doesn't mention any of that stuff. Doesn't mention any of that stuff. And my feeling is, if you haven't by this time decided who you're voting for, what difference is a debate going to make? None. I mean, you're so ideologically entrenched that you're going to vote for Biden anyway, right? But I was wrong. Not on that, I wasn't wrong, but I was wrong to say that the debate was irrelevant, because the debate was such a disaster for Democrats that its significance has rippled right through the Democrat Party, and its implications for candidates at lower levels, those who are running for Senate seats, for the House, for state positions, they're in trouble. They're in trouble because this debate was that much of a disaster. Now, we've seen that Democrats, what they're doing to try to salvage the debate. And in the coming weeks, Ann Coulter tweeted this, and I completely agree with this. She tweeted that she believes within a couple of weeks that the standard narrative from the left will be that Biden actually won the debate. They're going to try to change in your minds what happened, so that what you saw is no longer what you believe you saw. You will believe something else. That this is what they're going to do. I think that there's truth in that. But let's just look at the immediate poll results. CNN flash poll here, which says that, again, people being asked immediately after the debate, who won the debate? 67% of respondents said Trump and 33% Biden. Now, the 33%, I mean, who are those people? Well, those are the people that I was talking about, that a debate isn't going to change what they think. They're going to vote for Biden no matter what. Biden being, could be a pedophile, and he is a pedophile. And they're going to vote for him anyway. You see, nothing will change what they're going to do. Not Hunter Biden's laptop, not cocaine in the White House, not drag queen story hour in the White House, not a war in Ukraine, not inflation. None of that stuff is going to change those people, and certainly not a debate. But the debate, nonetheless, is very significant in terms of the ripple that it is sending out. Now, I have, as I said earlier at the beginning of the show, I have organized and moderated and participated in a number of high-level academic debates at places like, as I say, on CNN International, on Al Jazeera, on PBS, at Oxford University, at Princeton University, Melbourne Town Hall in Australia, the Edinburgh International Festival. And I've learned a lot through doing these debates. And there's always something that I call a pre-debate debate. And that lasts a lot longer than the debate on stage. And if you lose the pre-debate debate, you will likely lose the live debate. The pre-debate is private. It takes place in emails, it takes place in phone conversations, it takes place over coffee. But it's in the pre-debate debate that you are discussing the format of the debate. You're discussing the venue. You're discussing, who the moderators are. You're discussing how much time you get to respond, who goes first, who goes last. You're discussing all of those kinds of things. And it is, in my opinion, one of the major problems with the presidential debates. If I were organizing them, I would organize them much better than what you're seeing here. And I would be ruthlessly objective in the way that I dealt with it, as I have been in past when I've done that. I don't give my side any kind of benefit in doing it. What I would do is I would make sure that the moderator, whether it's me or somebody else, isn't a third personality on the stage. It is the role of the moderator to be like a good referee or an umpire at a sporting event. If you don't remember the referees in a football game or who's calling balls and strikes behind the plate, it probably means that he did a very good job. What you don't want is a Leslie Nielsen, calling balls and strikes. I think it's one of the Naked Gun movies where he's moonwalking and fist pumping and dancing around behind the plate. Very funny. But a good moderator recognizes that the debate isn't about him. It's about the issues. It's about the debaters themselves. That's where eyes should be drawn. So he shouldn't be a personality on the stage. Now, one of the major problems with these debates has been the fact that the moderators themselves often can't resist because they see themselves, we're in the era of celebrity journalism, and they see themselves as the reason for the event. They are so full of themselves that they are sure they are every bit as important as Biden, as Trump, as anybody else who is on the stage. They see themselves as they're egomaniacs, and they want their moment. They want to go down in history as the guy with the gotcha question or the clever moments in a debate. Now, I have to hand it to CNN because I think they did a reasonably good job in this debate. And curiously enough, the Biden team got everything, and I mean everything they wanted in the pre-debate debate. They got CNN exclusive broadcasting. Wasn't broadcast anywhere else. It was just CNN who got it. Wasn't on PBS or C-SPAN. They got CNN moderators who were clearly, we know this, anti-Trump. I mean, Trump haters. They got no audience, and an audience matters. Sometimes not having an audience can be a very good thing. But sometimes it can distract. Christopher Hitchens, for instance, a guy whom I debated, Christopher Hitchens was often very popular with audiences. And if you were to read his debates, you would see that he often lost. But if you were there, you would think differently. And that's because he had many adoring atheist fans who would sit there and lap up his canned jokes or quips that he had given a dozen other times at other venues and other occasions. He was a showman. He knew how to work the audience. And sometimes he would be debating somebody who isn't a showman, but who is an academic, let's say, who would demolish his arguments when you read them. But the audience could give you a very different impression. So audiences matter. They affect things. Why Biden wouldn't want an audience when they are controlling the event, when CNN is controlling the event, actually surprises me, because I would think they would largely handpick who was there. But Trump has had a way of winning the audiences. You know, his quip with Hillary Clinton, where she's going on about the Justice Department and how he wasn't personally engaged in these things. And he said, because if I was, you'd be in jail. That won the audience. The audience, I think a lot of those howls that you're hearing in the audience of laughter are people who are there to support Hillary. But they just couldn't resist laughing because it was funny and because they knew it was probably true. So they got that. There was no audience. And the Biden team also got a 1 to 2 minutes. I'm not sure which one ultimately won out, but we know that pre-debate that there was going to be a 1 to 2 minute broadcasting delay rather than the standard 7-second delay. Typically, that's why if you're watching a game live, you can, maybe you're trying to watch it also on your phone or someone else is, or maybe better yet, sometimes I've been at a game and I'll text my children and say, that was an awesome touchdown. And they're saying, what? And then seconds later, they text me and say, hey, we just saw it. But it's because they're getting it. They're not getting it live. They're getting it 7 to 10 seconds later. So why would that be in Biden's favor? Because it gives CNN an opportunity to give him a more favorable camera angle, maybe to edit just a bit what goes out to the public. Now, what I have to say is this. Given all these advantages, imagine how much worse this debate would have been if Biden hadn't had this. I mean, I'm thinking if you had been there live, if there had been an audience, and say somebody had been able to record this, on a cell phone and put it out there, I think we would see that this was far worse than what was broadcast to the public. Far worse. Now, I'm not going to waste time because by this point, almost all of you have seen the clips of Biden where he looks very confused. You probably have heard or seen the clip of Trump saying, I don't know what Joe just said, and I don't think he knows either. And he's not saying it sarcastically. He almost comes off just a little bit compassionate. He's quite serious. I can't respond to what he just said because I honestly don't know what he said, and I don't think he even knows really where he is at the moment. I don't think he knows what he said. Anybody who was there knew that was true. And in any other universe, that would be played in endless loop on mainstream media. It isn't now because, of course, they're an arm of the regime. They are the establishment. I'm fascinated by the fact that they try to present themselves as anti-establishment when they are the establishment. Part of their campaign slogans deal with change. Change what? You're in charge. You have control of everything. Big tech, media, every branch of government. You got it. Anyway, imagine how much worse this would be. But here's a clip that I want you to see that I think is very telling for reasons that I think most have overlooked. Let's take a look at it.
Look, folks, what's going to happen over the next couple of days is they're going to be out there fact-checking all the things he said. I can't think of one thing he said that was true. Oh, I'm not being facetious.
Now, I think that's very significant because Joe Biden knew going into the debate, and he knew coming out of it that he had an additional weapon that Trump doesn't have. And that is the proverbial fact checkers, who we know are liars. Places like Snopes, for instance. We know that it is their job to twist anything they don't agree with and to portray you as a fascist or a Nazi or a racist or whatever it is that they've decided to label you on this particular occasion. So Biden is here. I just am fascinated by the fact that he's admitting, and again, because he's not totally in control of himself, he knows it really doesn't matter how I did in the debate because the fact checkers are now going to set to work on Trump and they're going to demolish him in the media. This is kind of Ann Coulter's point, is that when all is said and done, they will have performed a kind of magic trick in which they convince you that what you saw isn't what you actually saw and that Biden actually won the debate. So what now? Well, I've been fascinated by the fact, not fact checkers, I've been fascinated by the fact that many have seen all of this, and I mean prominent accounts. I'm not sure how you say this guy's name. I've never listened to him. Jack Posobiec. Anyway, he puts his name as Jack Poso in this tweet. And I just happened to see this on Twitter. He says this debate is a coup to replace Biden. Even Elon Musk has bought into this nonsense, and he tweeted, you can see right here, a David Sachs reporter, he put this, watching the CNN commentators put the knife in Biden's back is actually sickening. No loyalty, no remorse. It's just gross. Is that not just admitting that the regime that media is part of the regime? I mean, real media. I was just with Frederick Forsyth. Some of you will have read my piece on the great novelist Frederick Forsyth, who before he became a famous novelist, worked for BBC and for Reuters. And he said, this really struck me in his memoir, he said that the role of media, their mission is to hold power to account, not to become part of power. It is to hold power to account, those who are in power, and not to become part of power, to become part of the establishment. And here's a guy who's saying, he's implying, the CNN commentators, they have an obligation to show loyalty to Biden and remorse because they asked him questions that he fell flat on his face in trying to answer. But I chiefly want to draw your attention to what Elon Musk said. They're just talking puppets. It was a setup for a switch. Now, I've just said I think that's nonsense, and I do think it's nonsense. And let me explain to you why I think that this read on the debate, this post-debate narrative, is wrong. Some of you will not listen to what I have to say here, and it is because if 99% of the evidence suggests that Elvis Presley died as a result of eating too many peanut butter and banana sandwiches and drugs, you're going to buy into the 1% that says he faked his death and is sipping Mai Tais on a tropical island somewhere. You're just going to do that. It's too enticing. There are too many people who will chase after the 1% rather than the 99%. But I'm trying to say to those of you who are sensible, don't be distracted by every shiny object. I do not think that Dems had this planned. That is to say, I don't think, to clarify, I don't think that they had planned a disastrous debate that would boost Trump's image and would send a ripple effect, as I say, of disaster throughout the party that has implications for other candidates. They didn't plan on that. They didn't want that to happen. This was not a setup. If the study of history has taught me one thing, certainly one of it's taught me many things, but certainly one of them is that secrets are almost impossible to keep. And you need to bear that in mind. Secrets are almost impossible to keep. I believe that the left's agenda is, for the most part, 95% open. We can see it. Their number one priority is a perverse sexual agenda. We can see that. I don't need to sit in on a secret conference call of theirs to know it. I can see it. That's their number one goal. I can see that the globalists are hell-bent on using Ukraine to topple Putin. I don't need to sit in on a secret meeting to discover it. I can see it. I can see what they are doing. I can see from their desire to sign a World Health Organization pandemic treaty that they want to destroy U.S. sovereignty and hand it over to an international body of unelected bureaucrats. Again, I don't need recordings of a secret phone conversation to know it. I can see that the state is very interested in expanding its power right down to digital IDs. And how do I know that? Because I can see what they're doing at airports. I can see what they're saying in interviews. I can see what they were doing with the pandemic. The 99%. Don't be distracted by the 1%, which leads you off into vain discussions and to vain explorations of things that are unknown and unknowable. Focus on what you can respond to, not what you can't. And I've said that history demonstrates that it's very difficult to keep secrets. I think it's Ben Franklin who said this: 3 can keep a secret if 2 are dead. I subscribe to that maxim. Doesn't mean that secrets are impossible to keep, but it means they are almost impossible to keep. And the idea that there are dozens, hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions of people who are in on a conspiracy that the rest of us just don't know about because none of these people have broken ranks and gone public, I find absolutely absurd. This was a setup. Ladies and gentlemen, the Democrat Party didn't need or want Biden to perform like this. They were hoping that he would do okay, as in previous debates, and that their fact checkers would level the playing field, and CNN would also level it by making all these stipulations. No audience there, hence any quip that Trump had that might have elicited an audience response, a roar from the audience, just falls flat because there's zero response. Listening to a comedian without an audience isn't the same as listening to one who has one, who can work the crowd. The jokes become funnier because you see how other people are responding to them. And the quips, the one-liners, they become that much better in a debate when you have an audience, and particularly when you have a showman like Trump. And Trump is a showman. Biden isn't. That's not a moral pronouncement. It's just simply a statement that Trump knows what an audience wants. He does these rallies all of the time. He's in front of crowds all the time. He knows how to connect with the crowds. Doesn't mean he'd be a better president. There have been many presidents who aren't good at this sort of thing. Many of you who aren't good at this sort of thing. And on the other hand, there are other people who are also very good at it, and I don't want them as president. Taylor Swift, for instance. But Trump is an unusual political animal insofar as he's gone from being a TV star, working in front of live audiences and with people, to now doing these political rallies, and as a politician, he performs well in front of an audience, and Biden doesn't. And that's why they didn't want this. So they were trying to give Biden every advantage so that he could win the debate. They didn't want this because they can remove him by invoking the 25th Amendment. Now they're in a pickle. We have, 125 days or so until the election? What are they going to do now? So they have a massive problem. But I want to get back to this idea that this was all a setup, because I want you to understand how these things work, historically speaking. Because one of the reasons why many of you will feel defeated and you feel depressed about the current political circumstance is the left has brilliantly set forward a propaganda narrative that they are superbly organized and they are a kind of godlike, all-knowing, all-seeing entity, infallible. And that is depressing if you believe that that's true. Musk seems to believe this. It's all a setup. This was all carefully orchestrated. It wasn't. Don't believe that. First of all, and again, the left wants you to believe that they are a kind of godlike entity because police states have learned that they can hide their inefficiencies and their incompetence if the propaganda is good. Because if the propaganda is good enough, it will convince the population that resistance is futile because you have no hope of winning. And there are many conservatives who have bought into that. Many of you have bought into that. Many of you believe that your own resistance is futile. It isn't. And this debate was a disaster. If they were all-knowing, all-seeing, capable of controlling an outcome, this is not what would have happened. This isn't the way they wrote the story. You see, you need to understand, first of all, that there's only one sovereign God, and he sits in heaven, ladies and gentlemen. He does not reside in Washington, D.C., or Davos, or on a yacht somewhere out in the Atlantic Ocean, controlling all events. They can have all the surveillance they want. They still are subject to the same human frailties as the rest of us, which include incompetence, which include the fact that you can't see or accurately predict the future, which include the fact that there are competing agendas, that there are petty rivals and jealousies. And by the way, they're going on right now. Everybody on the left is jockeying for position to be Biden's successor. Kamala, Gavin Newsom, Hillary Clinton. You think she has a book coming out in September just by accident? Hillary Clinton is hoping to be the successor. That's what she wants, as do the others. And I think the Democratic Party right now is in chaos because they don't know exactly what to do. And that is because the rules, as they are written, say that Joe Biden can only be removed for two reasons. One is by invoking the 25th Amendment. And if you invoke the 25th Amendment, you're doing it because you are stating that the current president of the United States is incompetent to be president of the United States. And that makes, guess who, president of the United States and the nominee, Kamala Harris. How are you not going to have her as your nominee in the fall? And they have a popularity problem with her. So you would have to get her to resign, get her to step down. So Joe Biden has to either resign or they have to invoke the 25th Amendment. We're past primary time. So they have a major problem as it relates to this. And of course, I guess there is a third way of removing Joe Biden and making sure that he's not the nominee. And that's if he dies. Just going to leave that right there. Who knows what will happen between now and November? But secrets, keeping them. Perhaps in all of human history, there's never been such an effort to keep something secret like the assassination of the Russian royal family in July of 1918. The executioners were threatened that no one was to know. This is the reason they didn't just kill Olga, Maria, Tatiana, Anastasia, Alexei, Nicholas, and Alexandra, the Romanov family, the last of the Romanov dynasty. But it's why they also executed members of the household with them. Those who were there with them, who had remained loyal to them and were there in the house of special purpose, as it was called, in the Ural Mountains. And after they shot them, they took them out into the forest and they chopped up their bodies and they threw it into an old mine shaft, covered it up. And yet in reasonably short order, word got out. Some of the executioners themselves couldn't resist talking about it. Another example, SEAL Team 6. To me, this is shameful. One of the rules is secrecy for them, and to not give credit to any one member of the team over another, because the guy who's guarding the door is every bit as important as the guy who actually put a bullet through Osama bin Laden's head. So the rule, the understanding was the entire team did it. But human nature being what it was, somebody wanted to go for immediate glory, make a book on a buck. Make a book on a buck. Well, I guess you could do that too, but make a buck on a book. There's a lot of things I could have said right there that would be offensive, and fortunately, I did not. How about the Caton Forest Massacre? It has been said that some of the executioners themselves were executed in order to keep it secret. This is where some 22,000 Polish soldiers and members of the Polish intelligentsia were taken by train out into the Caton Forest and then were systematically shot and their bodies dumped into mass graves and buried. What happened to all these people? There were rumors of mass executions. The Russian government, the Soviets, they denied it. But that truth got out. Human beings can't not talk about things. How many of us know this on a personal level where you have shared something in private and asked that it not be shared somewhere else? But that person couldn't resist going to someone else. And the way people, I think, salve their conscience because they know they're violating a trust is they'll say to someone else, now, you know what I'm about to say, right? I'll tell you, but you can't tell anyone else. And then that person turns around and does the same thing. And before long, it's spread all over the place. This is in part why I think accountability groups are generally a disaster. Person who is your friend today isn't your friend in a month or a year, and he weaponizes your secrets against you. It's a great evil. But the point that I'm making here is that to assume that the left is A, monolithic, and B, as a godlike, all-powerful, all-knowing, past, present, future entity that controls events and isn't subject to just chance, just human nature, is ridiculous. If it looks like Democrats are in panic right now, it's because they are. They are. Now, I want to remind you that they will cheat like hell. We know this. They will cheat like hell. Election rigging, these kinds of things, they will do them. And as for the rules for replacement of the President of the United States, we know that rules matter nothing to them. The Constitution means nothing to them. So you should be ready for almost anything. But I would have you understand that keeping secrets is pretty tough. Some of you may recall Chuck Colson's book, Loving God, came out, probably 40 years ago, maybe more. I was given it for my high school graduation, and he has a wonderful chapter. He was chief of staff. You don't know who he was. He became a Christian. But Chuck Colson was chief of staff for Richard Nixon, for his administration. And he has a wonderful chapter in that book, Loving God, that's called Watergate and the Resurrection. I haven't looked at the book in 40 years, or 30 anyway, but I think that's the title of the chapter. I tend to remember the things that I read, and he's comparing how the idea that the disciples decided to conspire and lie about Jesus' resurrection, this simple group of fishermen, and be willing to die for a lie, why that's so absurd when he says that here I was, one of the most powerful men in the world who could pick up a phone and could move a fleet from one ocean to another, start wars, summon Air Force One, Marine One, Secret Service, move armies, command generals. And the moment that Watergate broke, he said all of these powerful men were immediately trying to cut a deal with the special prosecutor that no one could hold the secret. They were all talking when they were placed under just the slightest pressure. He said, we weren't faced with death. We were faced with fairly light prison sentences and with public humiliation. And yet the disciples maintained it was true to the very end. Human nature is very real, and this idea of a lot of these grand conspiracies, and by the way, I'm not talking about things like, let's say, for which there's a lot of evidence. Like, I don't believe, for example, it's a conspiracy theory to say that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. I think the evidence indicates he didn't. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory to speak of a replacement of the existing population of this country. The evidence suggests that it isn't. I don't think it's conspiracy theory to say that Marxism and fascism are driving the agendas that we're seeing. The evidence shows that it isn't. So that's not what I'm saying. I am rather saying that there are these very attractive, shiny objects that people will chase after. When I say to you, why bother when the truth is right in front of us? Who cares who Klaus Schwab's father was? We know who he was, but who cares? We know who Klaus Schwab is. We don't need to know who his father was or what his father believed. We know what Klaus Schwab believes. I've read his books. That's what we're concerned with. Don't go off on these tangents. Don't follow these rabbits. The Democrat Party is in disarray right now, in real time. Now, does that mean that Trump is going to coast into the White House? It does not. I have said that Trump winning and Trump taking office are two very different things, because I believe that Democrats are prepared to burn this country to the ground to prevent it. Now, there's a final subject that I want to address here before, well, I guess there's kind of two subjects, but it's Jill Biden. Jill Biden. I talked about her on last week's show. I compared her to Ava Braun. I have had my own small little media campaign, social media campaign, where I refer to her as Ava Biden. And some have taken that to mean that I'm referring to Ava Perón. I'm referring to Ava Braun, Hitler's mistress, and in the last moments of his life, her life too, his wife. Ava Braun, who, as I told you in the previous episode of Ideas Have Consequences, was by all accounts a very nice person. That is to say, personally nice. People would say she wasn't malicious, she meant no one any harm, she tended to be generous. And that is understood to mean, in two biographies that I've read about her, that is understood to mean that she somehow was a decent human being. She was evil. Well, why was she evil, some of you would say? I mean, she didn't actually kill any Jews. She's not responsible for the Holocaust, because she knew. And she gave aid and comfort to the man and to the people who were doing it. And she didn't care. And that's why I've said to you that the Ava Brauns and the Jill Bidens, in a sense, are far more evil than are the men that they support. And the reason for that, as I indicated before, is I'm reminded of a quotation from C.S. Lewis, where C.S. Lewis says that for every one person with bad ideas, there are three people with no ideas. Their brains are just simply empty. They're vacuous. They're ideologically vacuous. And thus they're easily led astray by the propagandists. That's what's happening in this country. If the American people were properly educated and properly responding, the 33% that we made reference to at the beginning here, that say that, basically Joe Biden won the debate and they're going to vote for him no matter what. If those 33%, if their heads were filled with the right ideas and they understood the consequences of the bad ideas that they're lending their support to, the Joe Bidens of the world would have no power at all. But you see, it's people like that who empower the evil that takes place all over the world. And in the last few days, Jill Biden has revealed herself to be an ambitious, power-hungry, cold-hearted bitch. Some years ago, I suffered, as many of you will know, we've done a course on this, which is available to you at tomap.com, a course on dealing with pain, a subject that I know very, very intimately. But I suffered a life-altering, traumatic accident. And part of that was I suffered a traumatic brain injury, a TBI, as it's called. It altered my personality just a little bit. And for a time, I was emotionally, intellectually, and obviously physically. I'd broken more than 41 bones. I'd broken my back, my neck, so on and so forth. I was physically vulnerable. And my wife, because A, she's a nurse, and B, because she loves me, when I was released from the trauma unit, I first went to the step-down unit, but eventually when I got out of the hospital and I came home, I could do nothing for myself. I couldn't brush my teeth. I couldn't comb my hair. I couldn't bathe. My wife had to do all of those things. But because she loves me, she shielded me. And you have to bear in mind, too, that I was also on very heavy pain medications out of absolute necessity. You break your back in 19 places. You break all your ribs, your neck, head fractures, so on and so forth. You need some pain meds, and those would make me very sleepy. Sometimes people would be talking to me, and I would fade in and out of the conversation. And for whatever reason, I was emotionally very, very vulnerable. And as she said, the pain medications, she said, they make you just a little too sweet and you could be easily manipulated. She said, because you become so tender-hearted. And it worried her. And so she kept, to defend me, to protect me, she kept all but intimates, compassionate intimates, away from me. She was shielding me from a public. Now, in recent days, Lori and I have been talking, we've talked about this before. We talked about this in 2020 because Joe Biden clearly didn't have his full faculties about him then. If you remember, he didn't even campaign. That's the degree to which Democrats had the fix in. They knew the fix was in. Trump can have all the rallies in the world that he wants, but he's not going to win with rallies alone when your opponent is ballot harvesting and showing up magically in the middle of the night with duffel bags full of ballots. I mean, Dinesh D'Souza, my friend, has demonstrated this. And is it 2,000 Mules? I think it's called 2,000 Mules. Terrific film. Saw it at Mar-a-Lago. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. We talked about it back then because we were curious, and my wife in particular, she was very curious, what sort of woman must Jill Biden be? Again, this is back in 2019, 2020, when she's thinking, what wife lets her vulnerable husband, who clearly has the onset of dementia, out in public like that? But this has gone to a whole new level in recent days. As post-debate, Jill Biden, if you saw the video, and we'll see if we can put it up here as while I'm talking, Jill Biden rushes up on stage. Trump walks off under his own power, and he knows he's kicked Biden's ass and humiliated him, in spite of the fact that CNN had rigged everything in favor of Biden. Jill Biden rushes up there to help Joe get off the stage, to avoid him from just wandering who knows where. There's video of Biden wandering all kinds of places. We've seen him fall at the Air Force Academy, at the White House, wander straight into the bushes. We saw him just, at the D-Day ceremony, just turn and start walking away. We've seen him shake hands with invisible people. What wife, my wife, kept asking me, does that? And yesterday she said something to me in the car, which I thought was really interesting, because I told her I was going to talk about this. She said, any wife, any spouse who loves her husband or her children or an aging parent, let's say, part of your role is to protect those people when they're vulnerable. Maybe when they're ill, maybe when they're elderly, perhaps when they're very young, or maybe when they're just under attack. To protect them. That's not what Jill Biden is doing. She's out there now pushing. She knows the narrative is to either to get him to resign or to invoke the 25th Amendment. She knows this. But she's so determined to remain on the presidential gravy train that she is going to drag her husband's dead or drugged body across the finish line in November. What an evil woman. What an evil woman she is. I just want to draw your attention to that. Be paying attention to Ava Biden. I thought it was also interesting that last night, Sean Hannity made a sudden reference to Ava Biden. Coincidence? I don't think so. But anyway, maybe I should be his speechwriter. Finally, I get to this. We will soon be launching a new show called WTF, The World of Taunton and Fox. It will be myself and Lawrence Fox. We are in the process of trying to work out, some of the details regarding recording. He's, some 6 hours ahead of me in London, and sometimes that part's a little bit difficult, and we're working out some of the other details as it relates to this show. But we've already recorded one, and we'll get that out to you soon. But I do want to say this. There are some of you who have reacted to the name, some Christians who have reacted to the name, WTF. And you have chastised me for it, either on social media or maybe somewhere else. You don't like that name. Again, World of Taunton and Fox. And you say that no Christian would ever name a show that or would listen to a show like that. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who fall into that category, let me say a couple of things to you. First of all, I'm sensitive to your criticism, and I do take it seriously. However, with all of the things that are going wrong in the world, it amazes me how some of you people will focus on something like this and say, oh, that's crass or that's crude. You shouldn't do it. And you're not willing to stand up and be heard on the really evil things that are going on in the world. That's what I would expect from Russell Moore. Secondly, some of you would say, again, no Christian would listen to it. You're not the target audience. I do hope you'll listen, but you're not the target audience. We're hoping to attract an audience that isn't just the church crowd. I honestly am most at home not just talking to a bunch of people who agree with me. I do hope they listen. I do hope that I inform them, but I want to challenge the opinions of those who don't agree with me, and particularly people who are not Christians. So that matters to me, and that's part of what we're doing. But try not to be one of these legalists who focuses on the letter of the law but doesn't understand the law, doesn't understand its purpose in our lives, doesn't understand our role, our mission as it is here on this earth. And then finally, I say this to you, a final word. Someone asked me this past week, how come you're upbeat? How come you're upbeat? Is that just a product of personality, or is that because you know something that the rest of us don't know? Well, first of all, I should say to you that, some of you will know, some of you members of the posse who follow me more closely will know that there are occasions, like coming out of Africa a few years ago, or just recently from Central and South America, I felt a real heavy spiritual oppression coming out of that. I took time off of social media. I had to take time away from this because this work can be depressing. That said, I'm generally speaking a fairly upbeat and happy and contented individual. And I have a wife who loves me and whom I love. I have wonderful children, a wonderful family. I have a job that I love. I'm very clear on my mission. I know what my mission is, and thus it makes it easier for me to not involve myself in things where I shouldn't be. I mean, mine is 2 Corinthians 10:5, to demolish arguments and every lofty pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. That's my mission. I demolish arguments and I construct them. It's what I do on this show. It's what I do in articles. It's wonderful knowing your purpose. It excites me. But as a Christian, I also know that in the end, we win. That should matter. I've read Revelation 21. We win. And no matter what happens in November, we win. That should affect the way you live your life on a daily basis. But I do want to offer you this warning. Between now and November, it's going to get rough. It's going to get really rough. And it's going to get rough precisely for the reason that I just stated. Dems didn't plan on this happening. And they are willing to do, as I've said repeatedly, absolutely anything up to and including of Donald Trump. They're trying to create that atmosphere. They are panicked. They will burn the country to the ground to prevent a Trump presidency. They will plunge us into a third world war to prevent a Trump presidency. They will invoke lockdowns and put out scary narratives on some new virus, bird flu or whatever, to prevent a Trump presidency. Between now and November, it's going to get rough. Be prepared for that. You need to be prepared for that. And I would point you back to a podcast we did on preparation, what that looks like. But you need to be prepared for what's coming. And I'm not saying that to scare you. I hope it invigorates you in the sense that our side is advancing. We are winning and we can win. But if you believe that you're up against a left that has godlike abilities, then you will believe that this fight is futile. I don't believe that. I don't believe I face a godlike entity. I believe I serve a real God who is sovereign and who sits on his throne and who has called me to engage the world. It's always darkest before the dawn. It's cliche, but it's a cliche worth stating. This has been Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton.